Now, there was a recent conference, the Lunar and Planetary Science Conference, just happened. So I'm going to bring you just a few of the highlights of what was talked about there. The Chinese lander, China landed on the moon fairly recently in 2020, and it brought back samples. And the first samples we've gotten since the Apollo and Luna missions. And the interesting thing about the samples is that what they brought back was volcanic. You can see here's where Chang'e 5 landed. The Apollo missions are in blue and the Luna missions are sort of in the magenta color. The basalt that it brought back was about 1 billion years younger than the Apollo basalts. So the lava flows up there were younger than the Apollo ones, so only about a couple of billion years old. So we're learning that these large mare that you're seeing didn't all happen right at the same time. They were billions of years apart. So an interesting result from them. Of course, the Perseverance rover was a big topic of discussion there. And one of the interesting results from it had to do with the microphone that's on board. The microphone is located 2.1 meters up off the ground, and it's able to hear things. It heard the helicopter flying around. We've played you that before. But what it also is able to hear is its own laser. So let's see here. Did you hear that? That was actually the laser on Mars. It makes that noise when it vaporizes a little bit of rock. And the different wavelengths travel at different speeds as they get back to the rover. So let's hear that again with a new image. So you hear that click, that's the rock being vaporized, and that sort of ringing noises as the different wavelengths of sound arrive there. And what they found was the speed of sound on Mars below about 400 hertz is 537 miles per hour. Above 400 hertz, 559 miles per hour. Now that compares to the 761 miles per hour that we get here on Earth. Now, and that's at sea level, of course. Now, why is it different? Well, Mars's atmosphere is only about 1% as thick as Earth's, so sound has more trouble going through that. There's not as much medium to go through. Sound travels very fast through dense mediums. If anybody's put your ear down on a railroad track, you can hear sound from a very long distance and it travels to you quickly. Don't do that if there's a train. Please don't. But you can hear a train long, very, very, very far away if you've ever done that before. And of course, the latest weather at Jezero Crater on March 23rd, there was a high temperature of 22 degrees, a low temperature of minus 119 degrees, and it's early autumn in this location. So this isn't very pleasant. There's no air. There's 1% of the atmosphere of Earth, but there's no breathable air. It's almost entirely CO2. You have no protection from meteoroids or radiation in space. It's extremely cold. The water is frozen and buried if you want to try and drink it. There's no good habitats. It's not an easy place to go live, so very hard. Now, Perseverance does have a little friend along to make life a little better, however. Of course, Ingenuity, the helicopter, has had no degradation. There's nothing going wrong with it. It's flying just about as well as it did right on day one, and they just keep sending it on more and more missions. In fact, it's been scouting out for Perseverance to look out for sand pits. We've had rovers in the past get trapped in sand pits, and we don't want to have that happen. So by scouting and marking where those sand pits are, it's actually been able to speed up the rate at which Perseverance can drive, and it's been saving a lot of time on these drives. So Percy's now headed over towards that delta that has the deposits that maybe contain previous signs of life that was once on Mars. So very exciting there. The InSight lander, that mission's just about over. Those solar panels did get covered with dust, and there's not much hope for reviving it. But it did record over 1,300 Mars quakes. That's the most quakes. Most of them recorded at night. Daytime wind kind of shook everything and made it hard to pick up the daytime quakes. So that was more of a statistics anomaly than anything else. And most of the quakes were near the lander. They weren't very strong, so it was hearing local quaking. But a couple of them were above 4.0 magnitude, which is that's a decent shake going on Mars. So very interesting results from the InSight lander. And you can see where Zhurong and Perseverance are, and InSight and Curiosity and all of them. But Zhurong, what the heck is that? Well, that is actually a Chinese rover that has been on Mars cruising around. And they published a paper in Nature, and they said that the dirt, the Martian soil, was more cohesive than the satellite image predicted. They thought it would be more crumbly and more loose, but it turns out it's holding together better, and there's only a thin layer of dust on top of it. So interesting results from them. This, by the way, picture is not an artist rendering. They dropped off a little selfie camera and then backed away from it and took this very cute picture, which I quite like. So congratulations to the Chinese rover on Mars. Lastly, I want to update you about the HOPE probe. The HOPE probe is an international endeavor. It was built in Colorado, actually. It was launched on a Japanese rocket. It's being operated and controlled by the United Arab Emirates, and NASA is running the Deep Space Network that is getting the information back to Earth. So international cooperation is making this satellite at Mars bring us back some interesting data. Now, what's it doing? It's actually just looking at Mars, of course, taking pictures, but it's able to do it at a very high rate. So it's continuously monitoring Mars. So throughout the entire day, they're able to look for changes in weather patterns, dust patterns, any clouds that appear, and also monitor things like the aurorae on Mars. And we'd seen aurora on Mars before, and we thought maybe this is a rare phenomenon and doesn't happen very often. Not true at all. They're actually seeing it quite often, but they're in discrete little locations. And it has to do with the fact Mars doesn't have a global magnetic field like we do that creates the aurora for us. Well, solar wind running into our magnetic field. There, the magnetic field kind of pokes out of the surface in little areas. So these aurora are happening at discrete locations on Mars, and we're learning more and more about it due to this little probe that was sent there with international cooperation. So very cool mission. The HOPE mission is really, the impossible is possible was their motto. So that's a little roundup from the Lunar and Planetary Science meeting that just happened.